Hey party people, it's Adrian, and today I'm going to talk about my questions about the evolution of global English. Now, I'm sure linguists have studied all of these phenomena in great excruciating detail with lots of data and lots of journal articles that I haven't read, but just as an English speaker in the United States, here are some things I've noticed and things I have questions about. So we all understand that language evolves over the years, over the centuries. I understand you can go back to a time where if you travel from village to village, the language would change. However, standard forms were imposed politically and through education, through the printing press, and eventually technology continued to change the evolution of language. So, all right. So, as an exennial, I grew up in the age of television. In the United States, on TV, we would hear a network standard form of English. We would hear common varieties of US English in movies. And then sometimes we might hear some kind of British English, something that might be standard in the UK, something that might be popular in movies. But there are really all these varieties of English we never even heard that much. So, of course, my own language was influenced by the people around me where I grew up, but also by what I heard on television. So then, a few years later, with the internet, and then especially with YouTube, we are exposed to more variety of English around the world. So I can search anything I want to, and randomly I'll hear from Ireland or Australia or India. And just the way I would hear English on TV, now I'm hearing English on YouTube, but now it's different kinds. I've noticed something interesting one time from Australia. So there's this channel called Grace's World with talking Barbie dolls, but the voice was really weird to me. And then I heard Grace speaking normally in one of her videos, and it was still different. But it turns out it was just an Australian accent I had never heard before, and now it sounds normal. It was just different from what I would hear on Crocodile Dundee, the movie, or what I would hear from an Australian coworker. So we're coming across all kinds of stuff that is being input into our brains and could affect the way we use the language and the way we speak ourselves. So something interesting happening across the Atlantic Ocean between the US and the UK that I've learned about is grammar features crossing over. So something that was pointed out in a YouTube video I'd never really thought about was the word gotten. It's apparently an American thing. So apparently in Britain it would be more common to say have got, had got, instead of have gotten until now. So with YouTube and the internet, everything being shared globally, electronically, more people in the UK are using the word gotten. And there are other examples like that crossing in both directions. Interesting example I heard here at home. So in the US, the front window of a car is usually called the windshield. But my son just randomly, spontaneously referred to it as a windscreen, which now apparently sounds normal because that's something we hear in our daily lives through media such as YouTube, which has really replaced television. I just thought that was interesting. Another feature of American English that I've become very aware of, and I think many people here have become very aware of, is the T flapping. So when we say words like butter or hitting, it becomes more of a D sound instead of butter or hitting. And so now I will come across a lot of American YouTube videos, and then someone will pronounce their T in a way that sticks out like a sore thumb because it doesn't match the accent. So I think we've become aware of that here. And now, in trying to speak to the globe, a more global audience, we feel like proper enunciation requires making that T sound, like butter. So, in thinking about how all the varieties of English around the world have influenced me, I'm starting to wonder, through this global electronic medium we have, how are people who speak English as a second language influencing English overall? So I think I've heard that most people who speak English speak it as a second language because English has become so widespread and so important. And so now on YouTube, I'm not just hearing uh, varieties of English from English speaking countries where it's native or native. Um, we're hearing a lot of English as a second language. So, for example, um, there's a Russian on a channel called NFKRZ, or should I say NFKRZ. He's interesting to listen to. There's someone from somewhere in Europe who is called Adam Something, and he's also interesting to listen to. But neither of these guys apparently had English as a native language. But now we're hearing all the ESL speakers on YouTube as just part of our normal everyday English. And this leads me to wonder how other cultures that use English will affect our language and culture. So we often hear the negative side. We hear about British colonialism. We hear about American imperialism and the dominance of American popular culture. And we often hear about it in a way that's bad, and many times maybe it is. However, now that English is so widespread, it's actually a two-way street. So now, again, getting on YouTube, I'm hearing from different perspectives and cultures and becoming curious about other languages that those people use. This reminds me of the concept of assimilation. And you often talk about that when immigrants come to a country and they learn the language and customs and try to fit in and be successful. And there can be a negative side to that, but often there's a positive side in being successful in that society. However, there's kind of a flip side to that as well, as far as sharing language and culture. So I've made videos before about how I'm interested in learning Spanish, and a big part of that is all the Spanish speakers that are around me in Georgia. So it's really interesting to think about how we can become curious about other languages outside of English, even though it's so dominant and important. And here's a different example about sharing language and culture. Also from Georgia, I know someone who knows English and Hindi, but just happens to learn Korean because there are so many people that speak Korean in Georgia, and it became something to do. So all this brings me to an interesting question. Could all this technology actually counteract the cultural dominance of English? Probably not, but could it change the reputation that certain English-speaking countries have as being monolingual? I really think so. So there's criticism of the US and the UK for being monolingual and not interested in learning other languages. And for many people, that's true. I mean, how many times have you heard, "This is America, we speak English"? I've also heard from someone from Europe who came to the US and observed that many people are not interested in the language and culture of their neighbors that speak other languages. So I do have some defense, though, for the monolingualism, and this is a tangent. I'm sorry. In the US, we can't just drive an hour and be in a different country immersed in a different language. it's difficult to be exposed and to acquire another language in some places like the US and the UK, which is on an island or two islands. So also, the incentive is lost because let's say you work for a global company and you want to learn Mandarin Chinese, and let's say you spend 5 years learning and you get pretty good, and when you go to China, everyone's going to switch to English because they've been learning it their whole lives. So, however, now that we have these apps and we have YouTube videos, it's easier to learn another language. And so if we're interested, now we've got the opportunity, and it seems like more people are doing that. And then this brings me to my bonus question about artificial intelligence. So many people are using AI chat to help practice their language. And so how could this affect English globally? You have people learning English from AI, where computers are pronouncing words and deciding how to put words together, and then that becomes part of the language that people use, and then part of the language that everyone, including native English speakers, hears. Anyway, thanks for coming. Have a good one.